We made a mistake. That is the simple, undeniable truth of the matter, however painful it might be. The flaw was not in our observatories, for those machines were as perfect as we could make, and they showed us only the unfiltered light of truth. The flaw was not in the predictor, for it is a device of pure, infallible logic, turning raw data into meaningful information without the taint of emotion or bias. No. The flaw was within us, the orchestrators of this disaster. The sentients who thought themselves beyond such failings. We are responsible. It began a short while ago, as these things are measured. Less than 6 to the 6th power Deli ago, though I suspect our systems of measurement will mean very little by the time anyone receives this transmission. We detected faint radio signals from a blossoming intelligence 2 to the 14th power Delis outward from the galactic core as photons travel. At first crude and unstructured, these leaking broadcasts quickly grew in complexity and strength, as did the messages they carried. Through our observations, we watched a race of strife and violence, populated by a barbaric race of short-lived, fast-breeding vermin. They were brutal and uncultured things which stabbed and shot and burned each other with no regard for life or purpose. Even their concepts of art spoke of conflict and pain. They divided themselves according to some bizarre cultural patterns and set their very industry to cause of death. They terrified us. But we were older and wiser, and so very far away, so we did not fret. Then we watched them split the atom and breach the heavens. Within the breath of one of their single, short generations, we began to worry. When they began actively transmitting messages of greetings into space, we felt fear and horror. Their transmissions promised peace and camaraderie to any who were listening. But we had watched them for too long to buy into such transparent deceptions. They knew we were out here, and they were coming for us. The orchestrators consulted the predictor, and the output was dire. They would multiply and grow and flood out of their home system like some uncontrollable tide of devourer worms, consuming all that lay in their path. It might be 6 to the 8th power Delis, but they would destroy us if left unchecked. With aching carapaces, we decided to act, and thus we sealed our fate. The gift of mercy was 8 to the 4th power strides long, with a mouth 2/4 that in diameter, filled with many 4 to the 4th powered weights of machinery, fuel, and ballast. It would push itself up to 2/8 of light speed with its onboard fuel, and then begin to consume the interstellar primary element 2-2 to feed its unlimited acceleration. It would be traveling at nearly light speed when it hit, and they would never see it coming. Its launch day was a day of mourning, celebration, and reflection. The horror of the act that we had committed weighed heavily upon us all. The necessity of our crime did little to comfort us. The gift had barely cleared the outer cometary halo when the mistakes was realized, but it was too late. The gift could not be caught, could not be recalled or diverted from its path. The architects and work crews, horrified at the awful power of the thing upon which they labored, had quietly self-terminated in droves walking unshielded into radiation zones, neglecting proper null pressure, safety, or simply ceasing their nutrient consumption until their metabolic function ceased. The appalling cost in lives had forced the orchestrators to streamline the gift's design and construction. There had been no time for the design or implementation of anything beyond the simple, massive engines and stabilizing systems. We could only watch in shame and in horror as the light of genocide faded in infrared against the distant void. They grew and changed in a handful of lifetimes. They abolished war, abandoned their violent tendencies, and turned themselves to the grand purpose of life and art. We watched them remake first themselves, and then their world. Their frail, soft bodies gave way to gleaming metals and plastics. They unified their people through an omnipotent communications grid and produced art of such power and emotion, the likes of which the galaxy has never seen before or ever again because of us. They converted their home world into a paradise by their standards, and many 10 to the 6 powers of them poured out into the surrounding system with a rapidity and vigor that we could only envy. With bodies built to survive every environment from the daylit surface of their innermost world to the atmosphere of their largest gas giant and the cold void in between, they set out to sculpt their system into something beautiful. At first, we thought them to be simple miners, stripping the rocky planets and moons for vital resources. But then we began to see the purpose of their construction, the artworks carved into every surface and traced across the system in glittering lights and dancing fusion cells. And still, our terrible gift approached. They had less than 2 to the 2nd power idealized to see it, following so closely on the trail of its own light in that time. Oh, so brief, even by their fleeting lives, more than 10 to the 10th power sentients prepared for death. Lovers exchanged last words, separated by worlds in the tyranny of the light speed. Their planet-side engineers worked frantically to build sufficient transmissions to upload countless masses with the necessary neural modification, while those above dumped lifetimes of music and literature from their databanks to make room for passengers. Those lacking the required hardware of the time, they just consigned themselves to death, lashed out in fear and pain, or simply went about their lives as best as they could under the circumstances. The gift arrived suddenly, the light of its impact visible in our skies, shining bright and cruel even to the unaugmented ocular receptor. We watched, and we wept for our victims, dead so many DLIs before the light of their doom had even reached us. Many 6/4 of those who had been directly or even tangentially involved in the creation of the gift sealed their spiracles as a final penance for the small roles they had played in this atrocity. The light dimmed and the dust cleared, and our observatories refocused upon the place where their once shining blue world had hung in the void, and found only in the dust the pale gleam of an orphaned moon, wrapped in a thin, burning wisp of atmosphere that had once belonged to its parent. The radiation and relativistic shrapnel had wiped out much of the inner system, and continent-sized chunks of molten rock carried screaming ghosts outward at interstellar escape velocities, damned to wander the great void for eternity. The damage was apocalyptic but not complete. From the shadows, the outer worlds, tiny points of light emerged. Thousands of fusion cells of single ships and world ships and everything in between. Many 6 to the 10th powers of survivors in flesh and steel and memory banks ready to rebuild. For a few moments we felt relief, even joy. We were filled with hope that their culture and art would survive the terrible blow we had dealt them. Then came the message, tightly focused at our star, transmitted simultaneously by hundreds of their ships. We know you are out there, and we are coming for you.